He's gonna take you back to the... Shut the fuck up.
Let's take a trip back to May 2004. That was a time when a young James D. Fence Rolfe assembled a parody video review of Castlevania II Simon's Quest as part of a VHS compilation that also included the follow-up review of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And then nothing happened. Until 2 years later, when young James revived the concept as a series of YouTube videos called The Angry Nintendo Nerd, later redubbed The Angry Video Game Nerd, and the rest, well, you know. So let's just skip to the part that's most relevant, the part where something gets popular enough to merit the obligatory video game tie-in, and that brings us to Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures, released in 2013 for PCs. There's also a 3DS version that I was able to snag off the eShop before it went kaput sometime whenever, and that sort of spurred this whole thing in the first place. For what it's worth, it's not bad. The load times are kind of ass, but the rest of it's pretty good, so I don't know. Now, we reviewed this thing a decade ago when it came out, and obviously, why revisit this thing when there's a newer deluxe version available to the masses? Well, I could just do the deluxe version and be done with it, but in order to compare and contrast, I had to go back and play the original versions, which I have not done in years, and hey, I figured why not? The originals are still being sold on Steam as of this recording at least, so people might be interested in sampling those if they wanted to, and if nothing else, for the sake of having a review of this thing that is not a crummy 480p widescreen output, because that's all I had at the time and it looks like shit. So for the next 3 days we'll be looking at all of these things to commemorate the occasion, for better or worse I guess. And no better place to start than the beginning, so let's revisit Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures, Back to the Past, to play, well, you know the rest of the song. The story of Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures is that you are the nerd, trapped in a supposedly shitty game by an unknown force along with some of your friends, and the only way to escape this digital fecal matter is to conquer 8 thematically varied worlds that can be played in any order. You know, like that one game there. Once all 8 worlds are conquered, you'll unlock the 9th and final zone of Laughin' Jokin' Numbnuts, where your ultimate enemy awaits. Allegedly. Angry Video Game Nerds is a largely linear affair, though sometimes exploration is encouraged, as you'll be able to find hidden cameos from other internet personalities who'd be removed from the deluxe version, shitpickle cameos who are there for the sake of an achievement if you care for such things, and within 3 of these stages, you'll eventually come across your other pals who will join you on your shit venture. Jesus Christ. Shit venture? That's the best you could come up with? What are you, fucking 3? What the fuck? Oh, God. Oh, Jesus. Fuck. No. Never say that again. For fuck's sake. Jesus. Each of whom bring different skills to the table. Of course, you obviously begin the game as the nerd, a standard player who could shoot in 8 directions and can sometimes pick up a super scope power-up that improves your firepower until you take a hit. But there's also Guitar Guy, who will shoot sound waves that will pass through walls, which is useful, though his jumps aren't quite as nimble. There's Mike, who swings a shit saber not worth a damn, but he could scan for secret breakable blocks and his jumps are a little higher. Finally, there's the Bullshit Man, who's slow as shit, but his turds pack quite a wallop, and he could pull off a useful double jump for those moments when you really need it. And that about rounds up your motley crew of miscreants, each of whom have their moments to shine in the game. In addition to your partner allies, you also have secondary weapons to pick up, including a time-stopping glitch gremlin that doesn't work as well as it probably should, a screen-nuking super mecha Death Christ, and of course the obligatory useless rock weapon that shoots in an arc and almost always misses its target. But you do get a nerd quip each first time you use the weapon, so that's something, I guess. Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures was designed to ape the old Nintendo hard games of yesterday, the kind of games that were made exceedingly challenging and could eventually be conquered through repeated playthroughs and pattern recognition. You have a couple selectable difficulty settings, and the default setting gives you an overly generous number of lives as well as unlimited continues to help you along your way. Oh, and you could also save your progress. But only one save. Start a new game, and that save is wiped and you lose everything. There's an exception to this, old school difficulty, which only gives you a few lives, a few continues, and no saves. Good for those who care for that sort of thing, and when you beat the game, you'll unlock other difficulty settings that will no doubt challenge even the most expert gamers with even more limited lives and no continues, and, well, it's there for those who want it. Others need not apply. Any way you slice it, however, the game is going to challenge you, sometimes to an almost frustrating level, which seems to fit the general theme that it's going for. Nerd Adventures has you overcoming a lot of scenarios that are prevalent in shitty games. Questionable enemy placement, questionable level gimmicks, tricky death traps, severe knockback, among other things. But the one thing that adds to the overall frustration are these death blocks that permeate every level, blinking in and out of existence in timed intervals. Good chunks of levels are designed around navigating these death blocks, and they are often the worst part of the game, feeling more like something pulled from I Wanna Be the Guy than anything out of the Nintendo dumps. It's something I tolerated back then when this game was brand spanking new, but nowadays, nah, fuck that noise. I'd rather play the Irate Gamer game than put up with these fucking things. Nobody is going to get that. Besides that, however, the game does have its moments. There are callbacks to past nerd videos, like the Christmas spirits resembling the old Screw Attack crew, climb down that ladder and... Every time you die, the nerd spouts out a one-liner, and they're very nerd-like and quite hilarious. They do get tiresome after a while, and I can see why the remake does away with them, but it does give the game a bit of personality. Still, the characters will comment on the level design at times in typical nerd fashion. There's winks and nods to past nerd videos that are either plainly obvious or subtle enough that it doesn't anger the copyright lords. So in that regard, fans will probably get the most out of this game, while those unfamiliar with the nerd might get a chuckle or two, but their mileage may vary. AVGN Adventures does feature some pretty solid and responsive controls, and can either be played with a keyboard or a gamepad. I would recommend a gamepad of the Xbox variety for this game because that seems to work best, and you can even customize your button mapping, which is always nice to have. Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures adopts the once popular 8-bit NES-looking aesthetic that a lot of these indie developers liked using, and that it looks like an NES game with typical NES-style graphics, but you've got more colors, detailing, and special effects implemented to take it past this bar. It's a sort of style that seemed pretty neat at the time, but as time goes on, the appeal starts to lose its luster because now everyone seems to be doing it. The deluxe version would overhaul the graphics somewhat, but I honestly prefer the original's appearance. The levels are a little more colorful, it's a generally cleaner looking presentation, and I actually don't mind the random nerd crypts that pop up after you die. Sure, they get tiresome and tedious after a while, but they did add to that nerd charm. This is a fine looking game back in 2013 that I feel still holds up today. It's one of the aspects that I feel got worse in the remake, but that's neither here nor there. I do like the soundtrack in Nerd Adventures. I like listening to chip music, especially when it's done well, and this is particularly exceptional chip music. Each world in Nerd Adventures has a specific musical theme, and that theme fits in with that particular world nicely. And it's nice to have a wide variety of music that isn't just some lazy remix of the nerd theme over and over again. Though don't fret, that theme can also be found here in healthy doses. As for the sound effects, they also fit the retro stylings of the game, they sound decent. That's all I got. I've said it before and I'll say it again because it still applies. If you like old school Nintendo hard video games and you're a hardcore Angry Video Game Nerd fan, chances are you've already played this, you already have this, and so why am I even talking to you? But for the rest of you, Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures is a carefully crafted throwback to those olden days when game difficulty was more artificial than balanced. The humor might not be to everyone's liking, and the level design might be a little too brutal for some people's tastes, but if you don't mind a firm old-school challenge, you could do worse than Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures, and this original version still holds up fairly well, despite some hiccups here and there. Get it while you can, get the bundle if you can. There's a bundle with these, no? Okay.